Skyrim is full of places you're expected to find. Cities, ruins, caves, locations marked on the map, built to pull your attention toward them. But some places feel different. They feel hidden on purpose. The kind of locations you only discover by accident, through a strange detail, a hidden path, or by simply looking somewhere most players never think to check. And when you find them, it almost feels like you weren't supposed to. That's what makes these places so memorable, not because they're the biggest or most important, but because Skyrim does such a good job of concealing them, tucking them away behind mountains, beneath buildings, inside forgotten caves, or hidden passages that most people walk right past without ever noticing. And once you find one, you start wondering how many more you've already missed. Elder Sanctuary feels less like a location in Skyrim and more like something you accidentally uncover while looking for something else. It doesn't announce itself in the way most important places do. There's no towering structure visible from a distance, no major city built around it, no obvious sign that one of the oldest and most sacred locations in Skyrim is hidden deep. In fact, if not for the quest tied to it, many players would likely never find it at all. And that's what makes it such an effective concealed location, not because it's impossible to reach, but because it feels deliberately tucked away from the rest of the world, protected both by geography and atmosphere. The journey there immediately sets it apart. You travel through narrow mountain paths and isolated terrain that already feels removed from normal exploration routes. Unlike major landmarks that naturally draw your attention across the map, Elder Sanctuary exists off to the side, hidden behind layers of rock and wilderness that make it feel disconnected from everything around it. The cave entrance itself is easy to miss if you aren't specifically looking for it. There's nothing grand or dramatic about it from the outside, just another opening in the mountains, another cave among countless others scattered across Skyrim. But the moment you step inside, the tone changes completely. The sanctuary doesn't feel like a normal cave. It feels alive. That shift is immediate. The lighting softens, the soundscape changes, and the environment opens into something far more organic and untouched than almost anywhere else in the game. Roots stretch through the walls, water flows gently through the cavern, and light filters in from above in a way that makes the entire place feel isolated from time itself. It's not just hidden geographically, it feels hidden spiritually, like a place that exists outside the normal structure of Skyrim. And that atmosphere is what defines the sanctuary more than anything else. Unlike ruins or dungeons that conceal themselves through danger or mystery, Elder Sanctuary conceals itself through preservation. It feels protected not by guards or traps, but by the fact that it simply doesn't belong to the outside world. The deeper you move through the cave, the more that feeling intensifies. The environment becomes denser with plant life, more vibrant, more unnatural in the context of Skyrim's otherwise harsh landscape. Because this place shouldn't exist the way it does. Not in a province defined by snow, war, and decay. The contrast between Elder Sanctuary and the rest of Skyrim is part of what makes it feel so off the map. Most of the game's environments are cold, damaged, or shaped by conflict in some way. Even beautiful places usually carry signs of danger or instability, but the sanctuary feels untouched, pure in a way that almost seems impossible with the outside world. And that purity creates a distance. It separates the sanctuary from normal exploration, because it doesn't feel like it's connected to the same reality as everything else. You don't walk through it like you would a cave. You move carefully, almost instinctively quieter, as the game itself is encouraging you not to disturb the peace. That feeling becomes even stronger when you finally reach the Elder tree itself. The tree doesn't just dominate the sanctuary physically, it defines the entire atmosphere around it. Massive roots twist through the cavern, glowing with a sense of age and significance that immediately makes the location feel sacred. It's one of the few places in Skyrim where the environment alone communicates importance without needing enemies, dialogue, or exposition to reinforce it. And yet, despite how visually striking it is, the tree also feels deeply concealed. Not hidden from sight once you arrive, but hidden from the world. The sanctuary is isolated so completely that it almost feels forgotten. Known only to a handful of pilgrims and worshippers who intentionally seek it out. There are no settlements nearby, no roads leading directly to it, no signs that this place has become part of normal Skyrim life, despite its immense spiritual significance. That isolation is important because it gives the sanctuary a sense of fragility. It feels like a place that could be lost. Like if people stopped searching for it, the world would simply close around it and leave it behind. The NPCs connected to the sanctuary reinforce this feeling as well. Morris, for example, treats the location with reverence that borders on obsession. To him, Elder Sanctuary isn't just important, it's sacred beyond question. And while his admiration helps communicate the significance of the place, it also highlights how separated the sanctuary is from ordinary understanding. Most people in Skyrim don't talk about the Elder Gleam. They don't visit it, they barely seem aware it exists. That lack of awareness adds to the feeling that the sanctuary belongs to a different layer of the world entirely, and the quest itself deepens that idea, because reaching the tree isn't enough. You're forced to decide how you interact with it, whether you violently cut into its bark to retrieve sap, or seek a more powerful alternative through Morris's guidance. That choice changes the tone of the sanctuary dramatically, because it reframes the location from simply being hidden to being vulnerable. The moment you strike the tree violently, the sanctuary reacts, Spriggans emerge, the environment turns hostile, and suddenly the peaceful isolation of the cave shifts into something defensive. That reaction is one of the most important details in the entire location, because it confirms something the atmosphere already implied. This place is alive in more ways than one. It isn't just a hidden location, sitting passively in the mountains. It actively resists disruption. The sanctuary protects itself, not through architecture or traps, but through nature itself responding to intrusion. And that makes the concealment feel intentional on a deeper level, as though the world itself wants this place hidden. Compared to other concealed locations in Skyrim, which often rely on physical secrecy or hidden entrances, Elder Sanctuary feels hidden emotionally and spiritually. It's not difficult to access once you know where it is, but understanding the place is another matter entirely, because the sanctuary doesn't function like the rest of Skyrim. It doesn't reward aggression. It doesn't revolve around conquest. It asks for restraint, respect, and silence. Those qualities are so rare within the structure of Skyrim that the sanctuary immediately feels separate from everything else. Even visually, the location seems disconnected from the rest of the world. The glowing light, the dense greenery, the water, the roots, it all creates an atmosphere closer to myth than reality. Walking through the sanctuary feels dreamlike, almost unreal compared to the harsher environments outside. And that reality is what makes it memorable. Not because it's dangerous, not because it's difficult, but because it feels like something hidden so deeply within Skyrim that the world itself almost forgot what was there. When you compare Elder Sanctuary to High Hrothgar, the similarities become immediately clear, but so do the differences in how each place conceals itself. Both locations are hidden through isolation rather than secrecy. They sit high within Skyrim's mountains, separated from the rest of the world by distance, harsh terrain, and the effort required to reach them. And both creates a feeling that you're leaving ordinary Skyrim behind as you approach them. The climb to High Hrothgar strips away noise and conflict until all that's left is silence and snow. Elder Sanctuary does something similar, but through nature instead of elevation. The deeper you move into the sanctuary, the more disconnected you feel from the outside world. But where High Hrothgar feels restrained and disciplined, Elder Sanctuary feels alive and untouched. High Hrothgar is built on control, quiet halls, measured speech, isolation, maintained through intention. Eldergleam Sanctuary feels more organic, as though it concealed itself naturally over time rather than through philosophy or choice. That difference changes how each place feels emotionally. High Hrothgar isolates you through silence and distance. Eldergleam Sanctuary isolates you through atmosphere, making the outside world feel impossibly far away, even when it isn't. That's what makes Eldergleam Sanctuary one of the most concealed and hidden places in the game. Not just its location, not just its isolation, but the feeling that it exists quietly beneath everything else, untouched by war, untouched by politics, untouched by time in a way very few places ever are. A place that doesn't hide through secrecy alone, but through stillness, through reverence, through the sense that some things in Skyrim were never meant to be part of ordinary life at all. And when you finally leave the sanctuary behind, stepping back into the cold and conflict of the outside world, the contrast hits immediately, because it feels less like you explored a hidden cave, and more like you briefly stepped into somewhere the rest of Skyrim was never supposed to reach. Helgen is one of the strangest hidden places in all of Skyrim, because technically everyone knows where it is. It's the very first location most players ever see, the place where the entire game begins. You ride into it as a prisoner, watch the executions prepare to unfold, and witness the exact moment Skyrim changes forever with Alduin's attack. For a brief period, Helgen feels incredibly important, like the center of the world itself. But after that opening sequence, something unusual happens. The game almost completely abandons it, and that abandonment is what transforms Helgen into one of the most concealed places in Skyrim. Not physically concealed at a glance, but emotionally and structurally hidden away from the rest of the world. Once the attack ends and the player escapes, Helgen basically becomes frozen in time. While the rest of Skyrim continues moving, cities rebuilding after dragon attacks, factions evolving, quests progressing, Helgen stays exactly as it was left. Destroyed, burned, empty. And because the main story rarely sends you back there, the town slowly begins to feel forgotten, despite being one of the most significant locations in the entire game. That feeling starts the moment you eventually return. Most players don't revisit Helgen immediately after escaping. The world opens up, quests begin stacking, and the game constantly pushes your attention elsewhere. By the time you finally wander back to Helgen, hours later, maybe even dozens of hours later, the place feels different. Not because it changed, but because it didn't. The destruction remains untouched. Burned buildings still collapse inward. Bodies and debris are left scattered through the streets. The atmosphere feels unnaturally still, like the town exists outside of the normal flow of time. And that stillness is what makes Helgen so unsettling after Alduin's attack. It's not just ruined, it's preserved in its ruin itself. Most destroyed locations in the game eventually recover, repopulate, or evolve in some way. Helgen doesn't. It remains trapped in the exact moment of catastrophe, abandoned by nearly everyone except bandits and scavengers who slowly move into the wreckage. That transition from functioning town to empty shell happens so completely that it almost feels unreal. Because Helgen wasn't a forgotten ruin originally, it became one, and you witnessed it the exact moment it happened. That's what separates it from every other hidden location in Skyrim. Places like Eldergleam Sanctuary or High Hrothgar feel concealed because they were always isolated, always removed from normal life. Helgen is different because its concealment happens after you already know it. The game takes a place that should remain important and quietly pushes it into obscurity. And over time, that obscurity becomes part of its identity. The physical layout of Helgen reinforces this feeling constantly. The town sits tucked away in the mountains near the border of Cyrodiil, already somewhat isolated geographically. Before the attack, that isolation likely made it feel secure, a small fortified settlement removed from the larger political conflicts of Skyrim. After the attack, though, the same geography turns it into something else entirely. A dead end. A place people avoid rather than pass through. The mountain walls around the town make the destruction feel enclosed, trapped within its own boundaries. When you walk through Helgen after the attack, there's no sense of movement or recovery. The ruined towers loom over empty streets, creating the impression that the town was simply cut out of Skyrim and left behind. Even the sound design contributes to this. Helgen lacks the ambient life present in every functional settlement. No merchants calling out, no guards patrolling normally, no routine conversations filling the streets. Instead, you hear wind, distant creaking, and the occasional movement of enemies occupying the remains. It feels hollow, and that hollowness becomes more noticeable because you remember what it looked like before. That contrast is what gives Helgen its hidden quality. It's not concealed because players can't find it. It's concealed because the world itself seems to stop acknowledging it after the opening. NPCs rarely discuss it in meaningful detail. The war continues, cities continue functioning, life moves on. But Helgen doesn't. It stays broken. That creates a strange emotional disconnect around the location. This was the site of Alduin's return, the event that signals the beginning of the dragon crisis across Skyrim. Logically, it should remain one of the most important places in the province, but instead it becomes almost invisible once the opening sequence ends. And that invisibility feels intentional, as though the game wants Helgen to fade into the background while still existing physically within the world. That fading is what makes revisiting it so impactful. You return expecting some trace of the significance it once held, but instead you just find emptiness. The town has become a ruin so quickly that it almost feels erased from history before history even had a time to react to it. And the enemies occupying Helgen only deepen that feeling. Bandits eventually move into the ruins, treating the town not as a site of catastrophe, but as an opportunity. That shift is deeply unsettling because it shows how quickly tragedy becomes normalized in Skyrim. A place destroyed by a dragon attack, filled with death and devastation, becomes just another hideout to exploit. That transition happens quietly, without ceremony, without acknowledgement. And because of that, Helgen starts to feel less like a former town and more like a ghost one. The ruined keep beneath the town amplifies this even further. During the opening sequence, it functions as a desperate escape point, chaotic and dangerous as Alduin tears Helgen apart above you. Returning later changes the tone completely. The same corridors that once felt urgent now feel abandoned, stripped of movement and purpose. You're no longer escaping, you're retracing. And retracing your steps through a place tied so heavily to the beginning of a game creates a strange emotional effect. It feels smaller than you remember, quieter than you remember, but also heavier somehow. Every destroyed wall and collapsed structure carries the memory of what happened here, because unlike most locations in Skyrim, Helgen isn't just tied to the lore, it's tied directly to the player's experience. You didn't hear about Helgen's destruction, you literally lived through it. That personal connection makes the concealment hit harder. The game doesn't just hide a location, it hides a memory. Over time, Helgen drifts further and further away from the player's attention as Skyrim expands outward with endless quests and exploration, until eventually it becomes easy to forget. And when you finally return, the realization that nothing changed becomes almost unsettling on its own. Compared to other concealed places in Skyrim, Helgen works differently, because it's hidden through neglect rather than distance or mystery. It's sitting there openly on the map, accessible at almost any point in the game, but the narrative itself moves away from it so completely that the location starts to feel buried beneath everything else. And that buried feeling is what makes Helgen one of the most hidden places in Skyrim after its destruction. Not because it's hard to reach, not because players don't know it exists, but because the world leaves it behind so completely that it begins to feel disconnected from everything around it. A ruined beginning frozen in place while the rest of Skyrim moves forward. That's what makes Helgen so memorable after Alduin's attack. It becomes a place trapped between importance and abandonment, a location every player sees, but very few truly return to. And when you finally do return, walking through those burned streets in silence, it doesn't feel like you're revisiting a town. It feels like uncovering something the game itself quietly tried to bury beneath the rest of the world. Skyrim is a land that constantly puts itself on display. Cities rise out of the landscape, ruins tower over the horizon. Even its secrets often feel like they want to be found. But not every place is like this. Some locations don't just hide from the player, they feel hidden from the world itself. Tucked away in mountain ridges no one climbs, buried beneath ruins that no one visits, or quietly existing in places where realistically no one should even know they're there. These aren't just hard to find locations, they're places that feel forgotten, cut off from trade, from travel, from history itself. Places that don't show up in conversation, don't appear in quests, and don't seem to belong to anyone at all. And that's what makes them so interesting. Because when a place is hidden from the world, not just the player, it stops feeling like part of Skyrim's story and starts feeling like something that was never meant to be found at all. Reachwind Eyrie is one of the few places in Skyrim that feels truly hidden, not just because of where it is, but because of how completely disconnected it is from everything around it. As if it exists outside the awareness of the world itself. Located high in the mountains southeast of Markarth, reaching it is less about following a path and more about deliberately going out of your way to find something that the game never really asks you to look for. The Reach is already a region defined by harsh terrain and vertical design, with cliffs and winding paths that make exploration feel uneven and often incomplete. But Reachwind sits above even that, tucked away in a position that feels intentionally removed. There are no nearby settlements guiding you toward it, no meaningful foot traffic, and no sense that anyone in Skyrim even acknowledges its existence. And when you finally arrive, what you're met with isn't exactly activity or danger, but stillness. A quiet, elevated Dwemer structure standing alone against the sky, with no inhabitants, no defences, and no clear purpose remaining. That absence is what defines it, because unlike most Dwemer locations in Skyrim, which are dense, mechanical, and filled with automatons or Falmer, Reachwind feels stripped down to almost nothing. It lacks the usual complexity associated with these ruins. There are no sprawling underground corridors, no functioning systems, no sense that it's still operated in any capacity. It's just the structure itself, a platform, a tower, a fragment of something that once had meaning, now left behind with no context to support it. And that creates a very different kind of presence. Most Dwemer ruins feel like remnants of a lost civilization that you can still interact with. Places where the past is still active in some form. Reachwind doesn't have that quality. It feels inert, complete in its stillness, as if whatever role it once played has been entirely erased, leaving behind only the physical shape of its existence. The fact that it's positioned so high above the surrounding landscape only reinforces that feeling. From the top, you can see across the Reach, the jagged terrain stretching out in every direction, distant landmarks barely visible through the haze. It gives the impression that this place was meant to observe rather than participate, to exist above the world rather than within it. And yet there's no indication of what it was observing, or why it needed to be here at all. That lack of explanation is what makes it feel truly hidden and isolated. Not in the sense that it's difficult to find, but in the sense that it's been removed from the narrative entirely. The game doesn't reference it, no quests lead you there, no characters mention it to my knowledge. It doesn't tie into the broader story of the Dwemer in any meaningful way. It's just there. And because of that, it starts to feel less like a designed location and more like a leftover piece of the world. Something that exists without needing to justify itself. That kind of design is rare in Skyrim, where most locations serve a clear purpose, whether it's for gameplay, storytelling, or exploration. Reachwind resists that structure. It doesn't reward you in any significant way for finding it. It doesn't challenge you. It doesn't even try to hold your attention for very long. You arrive, you take in the view, you recognize the isolation of the space, and then there's nothing else to do. And that nothing is exactly what makes it memorable, because it creates a moment where the player is forced to confront the idea that not every place in Skyrim exists for them. Some places exist independently, without quests, without rewards, without any acknowledgement at all. And that independence makes Reachwind feel like it's hidden in a deeper sense. Not just physically, but conceptually. It's hidden from the systems that define the rest of the game. Hidden from the flow of progression, from the structure of quests, from the idea that everything should lead somewhere or mean something. It simply exists high above the world, untouched and unbothered. There's also something distinctly Dwemer about that kind of detachment. The Dwemer are known for their mystery, for their sudden disappearance, and their advanced, often incomprehensible technology. But most of their ruins still feel grounded in function. You can see what they built, how it might have worked, what purpose it might have served. Reachwind doesn't offer that clarity. It feels more abstract, more like a fragment of an idea than a fully realized structure. And because of that, it leans into the more unknowable aspects of Dwemer design. It becomes less about understanding and more about presence. Deepwood Redoubt is one of those locations in Skyrim that doesn't immediately present itself as hidden. But the deeper you go, the more it becomes clear that what you've found isn't just a location off the beaten path. It's something deliberately tucked away from the rest of the world. On the surface, it appears to be just another Forsworn-controlled ruin in the Reach, positioned west of Solitude, surrounded by the region's familiar cliffs and winding paths. You can see parts of it from a distance, stone structures rising out of the landscape in a way that feels consistent with other locations in the area. But that initial visibility is misleading, because Deepwood Redoubt isn't defined by what you can see. It's defined by what it leads to. Once you push past the outer layers, past the expected resistance and into the interior spaces, the location begins to shift. It stops feeling like a simple camp or ruin and starts to feel like a passage, something guiding you further away from Skyrim's surface and into a space that feels almost completely removed from it. This transition is what makes it so effective. Many locations in Skyrim are self-contained. You enter, you clear them, and you leave. Deepwood Redoubt doesn't work like that. It pulls you inward, gradually separating you from the open world until you emerge somewhere entirely different, Deepwood Vale. And that's where the real sense of hiddenness begins. Deepwood Vale doesn't feel like it belongs to the same world you were just in. It's enclosed, quiet, and strangely untouched, surrounded by towering cliffs that cut it off from the rest of the map. There are no roads leading to it, no natural paths that would suggest easy access. The only real way in is through Deepwood Redoubt itself, which immediately reframes the entire experience. What seemed like a standard location becomes a kind of gate, a controlled entry point into something far more isolated. And because of that, the Vale feels less like a place you discovered and more like a place you weren't meant to reach at all. The Forsworn presence here adds another layer to that feeling. Unlike more scattered camps, this space feels intentional, almost curated. It's not just a group of outcasts surviving in the wilderness. It feels like a chosen location, somewhere specifically selected because of how hidden and defensible it is. The surrounding cliffs act as natural walls. Their limited access points make it easy to control, and the overall layout gives the impression of a place that exists outside the influence of Skyrim's border conflicts. While the Forsworn are typically portrayed as aggressive and chaotic, here they feel more settled, more rooted. Like they've found a space where they can exist without interference. And that changes how the location is perceived. It's not just hidden geographically, it's hidden socially and politically as well. It's a place where a group has effectively removed itself from the rest of the province, carving out a pocket of isolation that operates on its own terms. The environment itself reinforces this separation. Deepwood Vale is visually distinct, with a calmer, almost serene atmosphere that contrasts with the harshness of the surrounding reach. There's water, greenery, and a sense of stillness that feels out of place, given how close it is to the more active regions. It doesn't feel abandoned, but it doesn't feel connected either. It exists in kind of an in-between state, where life is present but contained, cut off from the outside world by both geography and design. And that containment is what makes it feel truly hidden, not because it's invisible, but because it's inaccessible in any natural sense. You don't just wander into Deepwood Vale, you have to be led there, intentionally or not, through a structure that acts as both barrier and a gateway. This layered design is what sets Deepwood Redoubt apart from other hidden locations. It's not just a place you find, it's a place you pass through, and in doing so, it changes your relationship with the space around you. By the time you reach the Vale, Skyrim feels distant, almost irrelevant. The usual markers of the world, roads, cities, quests, fade away, replaced by something quieter, more self-contained. And that shift creates a kind of disorientation, a sense that you've stepped outside the normal boundaries of the game. It's subtle but effective, because it doesn't rely on spectacle or scale. It relies on contrast, on the idea that a place can feel hidden not because it's small or hard to see, but because it's separated in a way that most locations aren't. Deepwood Redoubt and the Vale it conceals represents a different kind of secrecy, one built on layers, on progression, on the gradual realization that what you've found isn't just another point on the map, but a space that exists parallel to it. Crags Lane Cavern is a location that, on the surface, feels almost impossible to classify as hidden. And yet, the more time you spend thinking about it, the more it starts to feel like one of the most deliberate concealed places in Skyrim. Not because of where it is, but because of what it's trying to be. Located just a short distance from Shore's Stone, a settlement that itself feels overlooked and peripheral, this cavern sits in a region that players can pass through multiple times without ever feeling compelled to stop. There are no dramatic landmarks that pull your attention toward it, no major quest lines that push you in its direction early on, and nothing about its exterior that suggests it holds anything particularly unusual. It looks like another cave, another minor point on the map, the kind of place Skyrim is filled with. And that's exactly what makes it so effective, because what's hidden here isn't the location itself, it's the nature of what's inside. When you enter Crags Lane Cavern, the expectation is familiar: bandits, animals, and maybe a small dungeon to clear, but that expectation is immediately disrupted. Instead of chaos or decay, you find structure, organisation, a space that feels lived in, not just occupied. The cavern is being used as an underground fighting pit, a place where gamblers and spectators gather to watch organised brawls, where money changes hands and violence is turned into entertainment. And that shift in tone is what reframes the entire location. This isn't a hideout in the traditional sense. It's a hidden operation, a self-contained system that exists just outside of the sight of Skyrim's surface, functioning in a way that feels almost civilized despite its brutality. The people here aren't just surviving, they're participating in something. There's a sense of routine, of purpose, of roles being filled. Fighters, organisers, onlookers. It's a small ecosystem, quietly operating beneath the world above. And that's what makes it feel hidden in a deeper sense. Because the cavern isn't isolated due to geography alone. It's isolated by design. It's meant to be unseen. The fact it's so close to Shore's stone only reinforces that idea. This isn't a remote mountain peak or a distant ruin. It's right there, near a functioning settlement and yet completely still disconnected from it. The people in Shore's stone don't reference it. There's no indication that this kind of activity is happening just beyond their reach. It exists in parallel, close enough to be convenient, but far enough to remain unnoticed. And that proximity creates an interesting tension, because it suggests that Skyrim isn't just hiding ancient ruins or forgotten structures. It's hiding active, ongoing systems that the player can easily miss. That kind of hiddenness feels more intentional, more human. It's not the result of time or decay. It's the result of choice. Someone built this. Someone maintains it. Someone benefits from it continuing to exist without interference. The cavern itself supports this idea through its layout. It's not sprawling or complex, but it's purposeful. The central fighting area is clearly defined, with space for spectators and movement that feels controlled, rather than chaotic. There's a sense that this place has been shaped to serve a specific function, even if that function is never fully explained. You're not given a deep backstory or a larger narrative context. Instead, you're left to piece together what's happening based on what you see. And what you see is enough to understand that this isn't a random occurrence. It's something established, something ongoing. But because it's self-contained, it never expands beyond the cavern itself. It doesn't connect to larger factions or major storylines. It doesn't influence the world outside. It remains small, quiet, and contained. And that containment is what keeps it hidden. Not just from the player, but from the world. Craig's Lane Cavern also highlights a different kind of hidden space compared to the places like Blackreach or Deepwood Vale. Those locations feel removed because of their scale or geography. Craig Lane feels hidden because of its subtlety. It doesn't overwhelm you with size or spectacle. It blends in, disguising itself as something ordinary until you look closer. And even then, it doesn't fully reveal itself. There's no grand explanation, no deeper layer waiting to be uncovered. It simply exists as it is. A quiet pocket of activity that operates independently of everything else. Blackreach might be one of the most paradoxical locations in all of Skyrim, because despite being one of the largest and most visually striking areas in the entire game, it still manages to feel deeply hidden, not just in terms of access, but in how completely it is removed from the surface world. Unlike most locations that are tucked behind mountains or concealed by geography, Blackreach is hidden vertically, buried far beneath Skyrim itself, existing as a vast subterranean expanse that most players will never fully explore unless they are deliberately pushed towards it. And even then, the game never presents it as something you can simply stumble upon. You don't just find Blackreach by wandering. You have to descend into it, piece by piece, through Dwemer ruins that act less like entrances and more like barriers, each one reinforcing the idea that what lies below is not meant to be easily reached. By the time you arrive after navigating mechanical corridors, Falmer-infested tunnels, and the remnants of a long-dead civilization, the transition feels complete. You're no longer in Skyrim, at least not in any recognisable sense. What makes Blackreach so effective as an isolated place isn't just its scale, but its disconnection. It doesn't feel like an extension of the world above. It feels like a separate layer entirely, operating under its own rules, its own atmosphere, and its own sense of time. The glowing mushrooms, the artificial lighting, the massive caverns stretching endlessly in every direction. It all creates the impression of a world that has existed in isolation for so long that it no longer relates to the surface at all. And that separation is what defines its hidden nature, because Blackreach isn't hidden in a way that invites discovery. It's hidden in a way that suggests it was never meant to be a part of the player's journey in the first place. It exists beneath everything, unseen, and largely unaffected by the events unfolding above. The Civil War doesn't reach here. The holds don't govern it. Even the sky, one of Skyrim's most defining features, is replaced by an artificial ceiling that mimics something distant and unreachable. And yet, despite that isolation, Blackreach is not empty. It's filled with life, but a kind of life that feels alien compared to the rest of the game. Thalma move through the ruins, blind and adapted to the darkness, while Dwemer automatons continue their silent routines, remnant of a system that no longer has purpose. Giant glowing flora replaces forests, and the ambient sound design creates a constant sense of unease, as if the entire space is alive in a way that doesn't fully reveal itself. This combination of activity and isolation creates a unique tension. Blackreach feels inhabited, but not in a way that welcomes you. It feels like you've entered something self-sustaining, something that doesn't need the surface world and doesn't acknowledge it. And that's what makes it feel so deeply tucked away, not just physically, but conceptually as well. It's a place that exists outside of Skyrim's awareness, even though it lies directly beneath it. The Dwemer architecture scattered throughout only deepens that feeling. Massive structures, elevators, and ruins stretch across the cavern, hinting at a time where this place was not just inhabited, but thriving. But unlike the ruins on the surface, which are often fragmented and partially reclaimed by nature, Blackreach's structures feel more intact, more preserved, as if time has moved differently here. And yet there's still no clear understanding of what it all was. The purpose of Blackreach remains vague, its full scale and function never fully explained. It's a reminder that the Dwemer, one of Skyrim's most mysterious civilizations, built things that even the game itself doesn't fully contextualize. And that lack of explanation reinforces that idea that Blackreach isn't just hidden from the player, it's hidden from understanding. Even when you're standing in it exploring its depths, you never feel like you fully grasp what it is or why it exists. And that uncertainty becomes part of its identity. The way you access Blackreach also plays a significant role in how it's perceived. There's no single obvious entrance. Instead, it's connected to multiple Dwemer ruins across Skyrim, each one offering a different path downward. This fragmented access makes it feel less like a destination and more like a network, something spread beneath the world rather than confined to a single point. It's not just hidden in one place, it's hidden everywhere, just out of reach, waiting beneath locations you might have already explored without realizing what lies below. And that idea transforms the way you think about Skyrim's geography. Skyrim is a world that constantly invites exploration. But what these places reveal is that not everything is meant to be seen. Some locations hide behind mountains, others lie buried beneath cities, and some exist so far outside the natural flow of the world that they might as well not exist at all. From the depths of Blackreach to the quiet isolation of Reachwind, from the concealed passage of Deepwood Vale to the overlooked systems beneath Riften, these places aren't just hidden because they're hard to find. They're hidden because nothing points you towards them. They exist without asking to be discovered. And that's what makes them different. Because in a game filled with quests, markers, and direction, these locations remind you that there are still parts of Skyrim that don't revolve around you as the player. Places that carry on untouched whether you find them or not. And maybe that's the most interesting part. Not that they're hidden, but that the world never needed you to see them in the first place. Some horrors in Skyrim are shouted. You see the dragons, hear the war horns, read the names in your quest log. But others happen quietly, beneath trees, beside water, just far enough off the path that you could walk past them a dozen times and never notice them. One such place lies just southwest of the Guardian Stones, the first blessing point most new players find. From the road hugging Lake Ilinalta If you veer into the woods just 50 paces from the trail, you'll find a Talos shrine. But this is not a place of peace. The statue is chipped, the altar is soaked in old blood, bones are strewn across the forest floor, a necromancer stands guard, not an enemy, but a fixture. Always there, always silent until you disturb them. There's no quest, no marker, no journal, no dialogue whatsoever. Only an altar where someone died, someone returned, and someone else made sure they stayed that way. Talos shrines in Skyrim are usually proud, built into cliff sides, marked on maps, visited in secret by stormcloaks and Nords who defy the white gold Concordat. But not this one. This shrine sits low, not high. Hidden but not revered. It isn't marked on your map, it isn't referenced by the Civil War questlines or Daedric mission. I wouldn't even really call it a good altar. It has no place in any quest, and yet it exists, active, bloody, and wrong. Its proximity to the Guardian Stones makes it all the more unsettling. This is where the Dragonborn's path begins, where you first choose your standing stone after you've left Helgen. Hope, power, and destiny. And just off that road, forgotten under the trees, is a desecrated altar to the god you're not supposed to mention. Someone found it, someone used it, and someone got killed here. And someone died here. The altar itself is stained, chipped by what looks like blade strikes, and weathered by time. A skeleton rests atop of it, arms spread slightly, one leg curled as if it's collapsed mid-struggle. The bones aren't pristine, some are charred, others are cracked. This wasn't a place of burial, this was a place of use. All around the site are scattered remains, ribs, femurs, skull fragments, not placed ceremonially, but flung, dropped, or discarded. One set of bones lies far from the altar, face down in the leaves. Another is slumped against one of the stone pillars. This is not the aftermath of a single death. This is a pattern. And that altar in the middle, it's not for praying, it's for doing. If you approach the altar, you'll encounter the site's only living inhabitant, a novice necromancer. They don't patrol or wander, they don't talk, they don't even seem surprised you found this place. But if you come too close, they attack, immediately, defensively, and with urgency, as if guarding something they were told never to abandon. Killing them gives you no answers. Their belongings are minor, a staff, low-level robes, maybe a soul gem, no notes, no journal, no clues. And yet their presence makes it clear. This place isn't forgotten, it's still being used, or at least maintained. Like a trap, no one disarmed. The arrangement of this place feels unfinished. The altar isn't scorched completely, the bones aren't fresh, but they're not ancient either. The necromancer isn't powerful, but they're vigilant. This may have been a summoning ritual, or a binding one, or an execution cloaked in spellcraft. But nothing about this scene says done. It feels like someone walked away mid-spell, or like the magic failed and the bodies were left behind as a warning, or a reminder. And Skyrim doesn't tell you what it's for, it just leaves the room locked and the door open. Lake Ilinalta is more than beautiful scenery. It's a lake full of sunken temples, drowned crypts, and forgotten ruins. To the west is Ilinalta's Deep, a necromancer-infested ruin. Nearby is a sunken shrine, and to the north lies the Lady Stone, another site steeped in mysticism. And then there's this site. It's not tied to any of them. It's not part of a questline or a Radiant encounter. But it echoes the same theme. Ritual gone wrong, magic cast without oversight, power sought in silence. Ilinalta doesn't just hold water, it holds secrets as well. But who really performed the ritual? There are no names at this site, no cult banners, no evidence of Daedric worship or a specific faction. But someone did this. Some theories say it's a rogue mage from the College of Winterhold, expelled for unethical practices. Others think it was a Blade's exile, trying to raise fallen allies from the dead. A few speculate it's related to the mythic Dawn, whose members still hide in pockets across Skyrim. The lack of detail makes the site feel more personal. This isn't a world event, it's someone's mistake, and you walked in after it was too late to undo it. But maybe it was that novice necromancer that you killed to try and get here. But surely they couldn't even pull off something this weird. The Elder Scrolls games are famous for environmental storytelling. Notes, blood trails, overturned cups that suggest struggle. But this site offers none of that. No prompts really, no instructions. Only one journal is nearby, but it doesn't give you any sort of information at all. And in that void, the player is forced to do something rare in Skyrim. Feel uncertain. Most places in Skyrim are knowable. Quest markers, loot, objectives. But here, you're left with only emotion, unease, tension, and curiosity. The site doesn't explain itself, because it doesn't need to. It knows what it's doing to you. What makes this place so terrifying isn't the necromancer. It's the fact that it feels alive, even after you've cleared it. The stones don't glow, the skeleton doesn't rise, nothing explodes. But something lingers. The shape of the ritual, the arrangement of the bones, the way your footsteps seem louder here. The feeling that if you return a few days later, it might look different. Skyrim rarely plays with spaces that watch you back. This one does, quietly. On forums and lore threads, this site does come up quite often. Some players think it's a cut quest site, a leftover from a necromancer plotline that never made it to launch. Others swear it was meant to be part of a Dawnguard subplot, tied to soul trapping or vampire experiments. Still, others believe it's nothing, just a little pocket of ambience. But if you've been here, you know better. It's too precise, too intentional. This wasn't decoration, this was deliberate. And it's that deliberateness, paired with the lack of explanation, that makes it so unforgettable. You leave the ritual site behind. The forest returns to quiet. The road takes you toward Falkreath or Riverwood, but part of you stays. You keep thinking about the bones, the altar, the circle, and how no one else in the world seems to care. No townsfolk reference it, no bounty lists it, no companion questions it. It's as if the ritual was never there at all. But you saw it, and you don't forget things like this. You return to the road, the Guardian stones shimmer in the distance, Lake Ilinalta gleams nearby, but the world carries on. But something in the woods behind you still waits. Bones still scatter the leaves, the altar still stands, and somewhere in the space between spells and memory, the ritual still echoes. Because Skyrim's greatest terrors don't always roar. Sometimes they wait, and sometimes they whisper. Skyrim is a province haunted by loneliness. Its wilderness is littered with ruined towers, forgotten villages, and shacks left to rot. But while places can be desolate, people within Skyrim often remain tied to their communities, however small or broken. Farmers toil beside their families, miners share fireside meals, even beggars find their corners of the city alive with noise. True human abandonment, where someone is left entirely severed from others, is rare. And then there is this one person, a scholar of Dwemer lore, once respected and possibly tied to the College of Winterhold. He is now little more than a ghost in human form. His exile to a frozen shack north of Winterhold on the Sea of Ghosts is not just geographic, it is emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. He has been cut off from his peers, ignored by the college, used by a Daedric prince, and left to spiral into madness. Unlike hermits who seek solitude for peace, this person's isolation is a punishment of obsession. He's been abandoned by society, by the gods, and finally by his own mind. To understand Septimus, one must first grasp the symbolism of his location. His ice cave is perched far north of Winterhold, closer to the endless sea of ghosts than to any human settlement. There are no roads, no signs of trade, not even an abandoned village nearby. He exists literally outside the map of civilization. Other reclusive NPCs at least linger near society. Nafi the beggar in Iverstead is shunned yet surrounded by villagers. Miko's deceased master in his shack in the woods died alone, but his home sits within walking distance of towns and hunters. Even Anise, the witch in her riverside cabin, still lives near roads where travellers may stumble upon her. Septimus is unique. He has placed himself on a patch of ice so far north that the world forgets him. This physical exile is not accidental. It represents how thoroughly he has been abandoned. While most NPCs remind the player of Skyrim's network of relationships, Septimus's location makes it clear. He has no ties, no allies, no family, and no future. When the Dragonborn finally meets him, his state of mind leaves no doubt that his abandonment is not only social, but psychological as well. His dialogue is fractured, full of contradictions, as if he speaks to himself more than to others. He references thoughts and concepts half-formed, as though the burden of forbidden knowledge has broken his ability to communicate. This mental collapse is what separates him from other figures. The Greybeards live in chosen silence, but remain sane and deliberate. Hermits across Skyrim often speak with clarity, grounded in either religious devotion or survivalist logic. Septimus, by contrast, is neither. His words reveal a man fractured by obsession, enslaved to knowledge he cannot control. Scholars thrive on discourse, on debate, on teaching. But Septimus has none of this. No one listens, no one even comes to see him. No one answers, and eventually his thoughts consume themselves. The result is a man abandoned not only by his peers, but by his own capacity to function in the world. As though mortal abandonment was not enough, Septimus's greatest tragedy is his manipulation by Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric prince of forbidden knowledge. Septimus believes himself chosen. He imagines that his discoveries are his own, that he has been singled out for a destiny greater than any mortal could achieve. In reality, Mora is merely stringing him along, using him as a temporary vessel for collecting information. His obsession with the Dwemer lockbox is not his triumph, but his trap. When the Dragonborn steps into the role of Mora's new agent, Septimus's fate is sealed. Mora abandons him in an instant, no longer needing his service. For a man who believed knowledge was his divine calling, the realization, or perhaps lack of realization, that he was merely a pawn is devastating. He dies not with glory, but with indifference, disintegrating into dust in the cave that has already become his tomb. This abandonment is cosmic. It is not simply that his colleagues left him, or his mind betrayed him. Even the god he worshipped cast him aside. And few characters in Skyrim face betrayal on this scale. Septimus's link to the college is never explicitly detailed, but his knowledge of the Elder Scrolls and Dwemer studies make it almost certain he once belonged there. His skills would have been invaluable in a place dedicated to magical learning, and yet the college never mentions him. No student remembers his teachings. No master acknowledges his disappearance. His name is absent from all conversation within Winterhold's ruined halls. This silence is telling that Septimus is not remembered as a tragic figure, not even whispered as a cautionary tale. He has been erased by omission. For a scholar whose greatest ambition would have been recognition of his work, this neglect is the cruelest form of abandonment. He was not cast out in scandal or remembered as a warning. He was simply just forgotten, as though he never existed at all. The ice cave itself mirrors his existence. It is crude, battered, and devoid of comfort. A single fire burns, books and scrolls lie scattered, and the great Dwemer lockbox looms in the corner like a coffin waiting to be opened. Unlike inns or farmhouses, it is not a place of life. Unlike hunter cabins or mage retreats, it is not a place of work or survival. It is a prison, both literal and symbolic. Septimus cannot leave because his obsession binds him to the lockbox. He is its caretaker, its watchman, and its victim. When he finally dies, the cave does not change. It remains frozen on the ice, an abandoned place reflecting its abandoned master. To stumble upon it after his death is unsettling. The fire still burns, but the man is gone, erased as thoroughly as if he had never lived there at all. And the cave becomes a ghostly reminder of the most abandoned man in Skyrim. The Dragonborn's interaction with Septimus is brief compared to the scale of Skyrim's adventures. They arrive, they listen, they aid him in his tasks, yet their presence only highlights his loneliness. For a short time, Septimus has contact with another person, perhaps the first in years, but even this is hollow. The Dragonborn is not his friend nor his saviour. They are his tool, just as he is Hermaeus Mora's tool. When his usefulness ends, the Dragonborn cannot save him. They can only watch as he disintegrates, leaving nothing behind. The player's role as witness underscores the tragedy. Septimus's abandonment is so complete that even the protagonist of Skyrim, the most powerful figure in Tamriel, cannot alter his fate. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of Septimus's loneliness lies in what it could have been. His knowledge of the Elder Scrolls and Dwemer technology places him in the most brilliant minds of his age. He could have been a leading figure at the college, guiding generations of students. He could have contributed to Skyrim's understanding of magic and history. He could have written books, shaped debates, or even served rulers with his insight. Instead, his genius curled into obsession. His isolation prevented collaboration. His fixation closed him off from dialogue. And his devotion to a Daedric prince consumed his sanity. All his potential ended in ashes on the floor of his cave. Abandoned by others, abandoned by himself, and abandoned by the god he trusted, Septimus is the embodiment of wasted brilliance. In the end, Septimus Signus is the most abandoned NPC in Skyrim, because he is abandoned in every possible sense. His cave is abandoned on the ice, his mind abandoned by reason, his body abandoned by the Daedra, his memory abandoned by the college. He leaves no descendants, no allies, no students, and no legacy. He leaves only a cave that few will ever find and fewer will ever care about. His tragedy is not one of violent death or battlefield glory. It is the slow suffocation of neglect, obsession, and cosmic indifference. And that is why Septimus Signus, mad scholar of the Elder Scrolls, deserves the title as the most abandoned NPC in all of Skyrim. What makes a place truly hidden in Skyrim isn't always whether it's difficult to find. Sometimes it's about how the game treats it, how it separates certain locations from the rest of the world through atmosphere, distance, silence, even abandonment. Some places are concealed physically, buried deep within mountains or hidden behind paths most players never think to follow. Others are concealed emotionally, locations that feel disconnected from normal Skyrim life, operating on a completely different tone from everything else around them. And some become hidden over time, slowly fading into the background as the world moves on without them. That's what makes these places so memorable, because they don't just feel isolated, they feel removed, like pieces of Skyrim that exist slightly outside the main world, waiting quietly for players willing to slow down and look closer. And once you start noticing these places, it changes the way you explore the game entirely. You stop focusing only on the obvious landmarks and major cities. You start paying attention to strange paths, hidden entrances, forgotten ruins, and locations the game barely draws attention to. Because Skyrim hides some of its most interesting places in plain sight. Not through invisible walls or impossible secrets, but through subtlety, through locations that don't demand your attention, even though they absolutely deserve it. And that's why these concealed places leave such a strong impression. They feel personal to discover, like you weren't just following a quest marker, but uncovering something the world had quietly tucked away from everything else. Something easy to miss, but impossible to forget once you finally find it.